morning everyone. Today we're going to look at lesser jihad in Islam. Just be aware that this comes up in the good and evil unit of paper 1, but it also comes up in the Islam unit of paper 2. War is an organised conflict normally consisting of intense violence between different states. War and conflict starts for numerous reasons, and throughout history we've seen wars start as a way of gaining power and control, gaining resources or land, correcting or fighting injustices, or defending national honour. In more recent history, we've seen also wars start as retaliation for crimes against a country, but also as a way of challenging power or unjust groups and dictators. Often wars are started with the interest of promoting justice. Justice is often seen as equivalent to fairness. It's a state in which everyone has equal provisions, equal opportunities, and is provided with what they're entitled to. Muslim attitudes to war and peace are based on the teachings of the Quran. There are two main ideas in Muslim teaching that relate to war, including jihad, to struggle in the way of Allah, and harb al-Maqadis, a holy war. Remember, there are two different types of jihad. You have the greater jihad, which refers to the inner struggle Muslims may experience, like overcoming temptation. The lesser jihad is the struggles that involve violence. This could include military jihad or a holy war for Allah.
Jihad is an Arabic word which means to strive and struggle. Jihad can be divided up into two different parts. So we have the greater jihad and we have a lesser jihad. And this concept has come from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where he returned back with his companions from a battle, and he explained to them that we have returned from a lesser jihad to a greater jihad. To fight with your own ego, meaning your temptations and your desires, to control your own self, is a greater jihad than to actually fight your own enemy physically. Once all avenues have been exhausted of communication, trying to promote peace, and if peace is still not being achieved, then at that point the last resort will be to have a battle, and that battle has to be declared by a government, which has to be advised and sanctioned by a panel of scholars. And when it does happen, there are a list of things that the army and the generals are briefed on. They have to make sure that it's only to achieve peace. They cannot kill women, they cannot kill children, they cannot destroy places of worship, they cannot destroy plantation and crops, they cannot kill animals.
However, Islam is a religion that advocates peace and peacemaking. The ideal society, according to the Quran, is Dar al-Salam, which means the house of peace. However, it's not a pacifist religion. Fighting and war is permitted in certain circumstances when all else has been tried and failed. Prophet Muhammad encouraged his followers to find a way of resolving their conflicts and promoting interfaith dialogue over the use of violence. Prophet Muhammad even told his followers, hate your enemy mildly, he may become your friend one day.
Now, how does Islam describe this idea and this notion of jihad? Within the concept of jihad, there is an idea of violent struggle, of picking up arms. And we have to look at what does Islam actually say about this? Islam is not a pacifist tradition. You know, if you see someone being attacked on the street, it's your duty as a Muslim to protect that person, and that might mean being violent. And it's only, and again, and this is expressed time and time again within the tradition, it's only as a last means, as a last resort. Jihad is about correcting injustice.
Therefore, in Islam, there is a very strict criteria used for deciding whether or not war or violence can be considered just war, and what constitutes grounds for a lesser jihad. What is clear is that war should only be fought for Allah. In the Quran, it says, fight for the sake of Allah those who fight against you, but do not attack them first. This also makes it clear to Muslims that they're not permitted to start any violence, and it should only ever be used as a last resort. Furthermore, any violence should only last as long as needed. If the enemy surrenders or calls for peace, Muslims are expected to put an end to that violence. In the Quran it says, but if the enemy inclines towards peace, do thou also incline towards peace, and trust in Allah, for he is one that hears and knows all things. The criteria for holy wars in Islam include that it has to be fought for a just cause, which is either that Islam is being attacked or that people are suffering. It must be a last resort, and all non-violent methods should have been tried first. It must be declared by a Muslim authority, and it must cause minimal suffering. It shouldn't target innocent civilians, especially elderly, women or children, and it must end when the enemy surrenders. Any prisoners of war at that point have to be returned. Prophet Muhammad himself said, "I enjoin you to treat the captives well." So one of the D questions you could get in this unit is whether or not Muslims should use violence to stop injustice. One of the main arguments is that Muslims have a duty to stand up for justice. In the Quran, Muslims are told believers stand up firmly for justice. The word firmly here could imply that violence and war can be used if it's done with the intention of stopping injustice. In addition, Islam is not a pacifist religion, and some of the teachings do allow the use of violence or war if fighting for justice. Muslims follow the criteria of the lesser jihad or holy war, which state that it must be for a just cause. The criteria includes it must be fought for a just cause, which is either Islam or people suffering. It has to be a last resort, and all non-violent methods have to have been tried first. It has to be authorised by a Muslim authority and cause minimal suffering. Some Muslims might agree and argue that Muslims have used violence or war in the past to stop injustice. It was said that 29 battles were fought during the life of Prophet Muhammad, although he didn't actively participate in all of them. In addition, the rules regarding lesser jihad were given by Muhammad following a battle for justice. According to the hadith, when returning from battle, he said, "We are finished with the lesser jihad, now we are starting the greater jihad." This could imply that Muslims are permitted to use war and violence when it's needed. However, there is some dispute over the words that are used here, and some scholars question whether they're reliable words of Prophet Muhammad. However, on the other hand, there are many Muslims that disagree with the use of violence. Many Muslims argue that whilst Prophet Muhammad allowed the use of violence and war as a means of stopping injustice, he argued that it was the lesser option and should try to be avoided. In the Quran it says, "Fight for the sake of Allah those who fight against you, but do not attack them first." In addition it says, "But if their enemy inclines towards peace, do thou also incline towards peace." As such, Muslims might argue that they should look at every other option before resorting to violence. In addition, some Muslims might argue that if a war is to challenge injustices or issues related to state or governing authorities, then it's forbidden for them to intervene. In the Quran it says, "Fight for the sake of Allah those who fight against you, but do not attack them first." Consequently, Muslims are not permitted to fight for any other reason other than Allah. Fighting for a social reason can't be seen as a holy or just war. This was arguably seen in the case of Muhammad Ali in the war in Vietnam. Whilst he was drafted in to fight in the war, he refused due to the fact that it wasn't being fought for Allah. Finally, many Muslims might argue that there are better ways to stop injustice, such as interfaith dialogue. In the hadith it says, "Whoever amongst you sees an evil, he must change it with his hand. If he's not able to do so, then with his tongue." As such, Prophet Muhammad seemed to imply that there were numerous ways to stop injustice that don't involve violence or the destruction of Allah's creation. He himself, during his lifetime, was seen to engage in interfaith dialogue as a way of resolving conflict. So I hope you found that information useful. As always, if you want to test yourself, you can go on Quizlet or Kahoot, or you can have a go at the practice exam questions on the following slide. Good luck.